subscribe to my sister's channel. She will also voice her favorite plots. Let's give her a big asset. Thus, we assume that this gas not only makes it impossible to use the chakra for a long time, but also fatally poisons the body. We don't have the opportunity to investigate it, but from the available data, we can definitely conclude that this cloud development needs to be destroyed. The guy finished, looked around the others with his eyes and sat down to, "Thank you, Shikamaru." Frowning even more, Naruto waited for the reaction of the others. Uzumaki discussed the most important problems of the village first with his closest ones, only then voicing the decision to the Council of Hunins. His personal collection included Shikamaru Nara, Tsunade Senju, and Ino Yamanaka, the head of the Hidden Leaf Interrogation Department. Sakura replaced the fifth one today. The prolonged silence was interrupted by a stunned Yamanaka. But it turns out that the cloud is already ready to use it. Most likely, it has already been used. Shikamaru skimmed through the reports with a glance before continuing. Lee's squad was destroyed. He's the only one who survived. Judging by his story, what happened to them is very similar to our information. Lee-san can't use the chakra, that's what saved him, Sakura. But if they've already used it, Ino paused, confused by her own conclusions. Then the shinobi sent on this mission will not escape this gas. Naruto finished for her. There was a deathly silence in the office. Sakura was the first to break it, stammering, whispering, "So we're going to send the ninja to certain death?" Swallowing, Haruno continued, "Where is our target?" Here, Naruto poked his finger at the map. "It's too far," Ino said in a sinking voice. "The medics won't be able to help. But who will we send?" Haruno's questioning gaze was directed at the Hokage. "Who are you going to send, Naruto? Ordinary shinobi will not cope with this," Yamanaka answered her instead of the blonde. "But even we never sent Umbu to die. Maybe we'll have to look for volunteers. I'll go." Shikamaru's calm voice stunned the girls. Naruto sat lost in his thoughts. "Shikamaru." Ino was the first to move away from the shock. "What are you talking about?" "Come on, Ino, the Umbu don't work that far. Besides," the guy smiled, putting his hand behind his head, "who else besides me has the sense to complete the task properly? Shikamaru, this is not a topic that you can joke about." Sakura supported her friend. "If you're so smart, then how else are you smart enough to throw them around like that?" The blonde jumped up, turned on by the mere thought of losing her friend. "Yes, and my shadow theater will help me keep them from releasing gas if I am discovered. But I might need a partner. Don't even dare to think, Shikamaru." Yamanaka clearly wasn't going to give up. The inflamed girls were interrupted by Naruto's quiet voice, "I'll go." Looking up at his old friend, the seventh continued, "They're right, Shikamaru. Don't rush to die." The girls, speechless, stared at the blonde. Nara was no less amazed. "Naruto, you're a Hokage, do you even understand what you're saying? We both know that only your genius can save Konoha in difficult times. Try to raise a decent generation of young shinobi, Shikamaru, and give them the will of fire. Starting tomorrow, you are Hokage." Naruto got up and left the office, putting an end to this conversation. Sakura's tears distracted Naru from his stupor, and he looked at her sympathetically, not knowing what he could say. Frozen, Ino did not take her eyes off the doorway where Naruto had just been. Naruto stood in the hallway, looking at the portraits of his predecessors. Shikamaru came out of the office and stood next to him. "You know, Naruto, I may agree to become a Hokage, in case of your death," the guy began, specially highlighting the last words. "But how will the elders and Hunins of the village look at it?" Naruto cursed and looked resentfully at his friend. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Despite the seriousness of the situation, Nara couldn't help but smile. "Yes. You didn't even give us a word to say." Naruto smiled back. but didn't say anything. Everyone thought about something different, looking at the portraits of the previous leaders of the village. "Are you sure I can't talk you out of it?" Naruto shook his head negatively. "And he?" "He would have done the same," sighing heavily, Shikamaru asked, "Naruto, why? Why is it necessary to sacrifice yourself?" "They all defended the village and its inhabitants, gave their lives," the blonde man answered after a while. "I love Konoha with all my heart, and I will not send any of my comrades to certain death for anything. It's probably my duty as a Hokage." Following Naruto's gaze, Nara wasn't surprised at all. Uzumaki did not take his eyes off his father's face. Hearing the door slam in the distance, the brunette jerked, as if he suddenly remembered something important. "Can I ask you something?" Shikamaru waited until Naruto stared at him questioningly, and then continued, "Say goodbye to Ino." The uncomprehending face of the seventh Hokage spoke for itself. "Ino loves you, Naruto. He loves with all his heart, and without asking for anything in return. That's why she won't dissuade you like Sakura. She won't cry and beg you to stay. Ino respects your choice. She never told you about her feelings because she didn't want to be a burden to you. I have known her since childhood and have not seen anyone capable of loving like her. Please say goodbye to her. Give her a chance to tell you everything. Don't make her live with it." "Dadabayo, I'm counting on you," Shikamaru finished before leaving. Uzumaki, who was left alone, could not move from his place yet. Ino couldn't remember exactly when she saw something more in the reckless idiot. Day after day, Naruto's smile became an increasingly significant thing in her life, overshadowing everything else. One day, Ino discovered that she seemed to love Naruto Uzumaki. Of course, this problem had to be solved not by her, but by the faithful Shikamaru. The guy went through a real brainstorm, but, as Yamanaka noted for herself, all this was not in vain. She loves Naruto Uzumaki. After learning about his choice, the blonde was not just speechless. Before her eyes, along with Naruto coming out of the office, the whole world was collapsing into small pieces. Ino has long been accustomed to the idea that her feelings are not reciprocal. But Naruto, at least, was nearby. She knew that everything was fine with him, lived from meeting to meeting, and was as happy as possible. Hearing that she could lose him, the blonde could not believe her ears. The most important person in her life has just announced that he will die. If she had been offered to go with him and die together, she would have agreed without hesitation. But no one asked her, and it turns out that her fate is to live without Naruto. Yamanaka was torn from the inside, but she had to be strong for him. Naruto's universal kindness will only cause him extra pain if he knows about her feelings. With superhuman efforts, restraining the scream rushing out, Ino almost blindly jumped out of the office. "I wanted to run away, fly away, hide from myself." After closing the house, the blonde went into silent crying. The noise of the evening bustle coming from the window slowly subsided. Naruto had been lying on the bed for over an hour, studying the ceiling. Thinking about something, the blonde looked very peaceful. It would seem that nothing is capable of breaking the home idol, but there was one but. And this but slammed the door, as if it intended to break it. Naruto absently looked at the doorway of his room, where the fifth was standing. Did you really decide to do this?" Behind the angry face, there was clearly a poorly concealed excitement. The blonde man stared at her uncomprehendingly, still in his thoughts. "Bachan, Shikamaru told me everything," Tsunade explained. "Answer me, is it true?" Slowly getting up from the bed, Naruto cautiously replied, "Apparently, yes. Did you think with your head when you decided to go there?" "Yes," the blonde man said even more cautiously, trying to figure out if anything was threatening him. "Do you remember that you are also a Hokage?" Naruto instantly became serious and answered the question with a question. "Did your predecessors remember?" Tsunade was taken aback by this. "Ba-chan, they've already tested the effect of the gas. We don't have time to plan anything, you know? Enthusiastically waving his arms, Naruto began to explain, the shinobi of the leaf will die. I can't let that happen. Approaching Tsunade closely, Naruto looked into her eyes. This is my duty to the Hokage. Why this debt takes away our best shinobi, the woman whispered, looking at the blonde man's face as if for the first time. Approaching the guy, Tsunade motherly hugged him. You just promise that you will try to survive, Naruto. I promise, clinging to the fifth in response, he thought, I think I'm beginning to understand you, father. Meanwhile, Tsunade imperceptibly wiped away a tear. When are you leaving? Tsunade asked and, pulling away, waited for an answer. Tomorrow, at sunset. I need to get to the mountains in time for the night. I will personally collect your equipment. Naruto broke into his trademark smile. Thank you, Bachan. Unable to stand it, the woman also smiled, albeit sadly. Well, bend over, and for persuasiveness slapped on the back of the head. Kissing Naruto on the forehead, Tsunade repeated, you promised. Sitting on the windowsill, Naruto looked at the stars. He liked to think that somewhere among them there were two most important ones, Mom and Dad. At the sight of the peacefully sleeping village, the cool wind warmed the blonde and filled him with faith that he was doing the right thing. The Fifth World War was unleashed a couple of years after the previous one. Never reconciled with Sasuke, Raikage could not stand the decision about Uchiha, and declared war. Little by little, all the great countries got involved in this. Konoha's only ally was Suna, ruled by Gaara. The rest of the villages, fearing the power of Uzumaki, joined the hidden cloud. Realizing the pointlessness of open battles with the leaf, where the key figure will be the Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tailed, the Kage refused a direct offensive. The five great countries lived the same way as before, except for cooperation. Any clashes between shinobi from different villages ended in battles and deaths. The economy was being undermined. The ninjas performing the task could be attacked by enemy Hunins at any moment. Raids were carried out on the civilian population of the countries of Fire and Wind, forcing an increase in the number of patrols. A large number of false missions, the result of which turned out to be an ambush, forced the Hokage to forbid genins to leave the village. Naruto and Gaara understood that this had to stop, but both still believed in people and wished for peace. Intelligence had previously reported on many studies conducted in the secret laboratory of the Raikage, but most of the information was indirect. People disappeared here and there. From time to time strange chakra missions were recorded in the same area of the map. Famous scientists disappeared from view. Frowning, thinking that it would be good to violate his ideals and interrogate some Hunin, or even the Raikage himself, Naruto abruptly started up Ino. Naruto, kicking all the pebbles he could see, walked towards Yamanaki's house. Desperately trying to come up with something worthwhile, Uzumaki's brain was already boiling, but it did not give any result. The blonde's entire experience in love affairs stopped at attempts to call Sakura to Ichiraku, which remained unsuccessful. Of course, he had dined there with her more than once, but not as part of a date, and Sai did not look like an attribute of an intimate meeting. Cursing his indecision, Naruto was approaching the block he needed with record speed for a snail. Who the hell starts a conversation like that? The guy rejected another option before it dawned on him. Delighted with the brilliant guess, the blonde did not notice that he began to speak out loud, "It's night, Dadabayo." Exclaiming, Naruto even seemed to calm down and scratched his head rather. And my soul seems to feel better. The war hero was much more afraid of a frank conversation with a girl than of enemy shinobi. That's right, she's sleeping now, the guy continued noticeably cheered up, it's worth going to her in the morning. And I'd be sleeping right now, too, if you hadn't been dragged under my window. The voice that came from nowhere hardly suspected who the intruder was. Yes, I'm leaving. Naruto, before disappearing around the corner, could not resist and stuck out his tongue. On the way home, the blonde could not relax completely. The much-desired calmness was disappearing with every step, turning into doubts. Maybe it was worth waking up? Uzumaki thought, puzzled, and turned around in the opposite direction. At that moment, Haruno came around the corner, clearly not expecting to see her friend. After a confused greeting, the girl mumbled something like, "See you tomorrow," and tried to get out of sight as soon as possible. Sakura looked somewhat guilty and clearly did not want to meet someone, but Naruto did not pay attention to this. Now he had his own problems, and they completely occupied his head. He was waiting for a conversation with a girl, and this task was definitely not one of the easy ones. Yes, I am Hokage, after all, or who, Databeo. For persuasiveness, waving his hand, Naruto confidently went to Yamanaka. When he reached the door of Ino, the blonde man slowed down, thinking. He still hasn't decided what he's going to say. The way to Ino took unacceptably little time in his opinion, and now he was again marking time in one place. On the other hand, just breaking in the middle of the night is also somehow not too good. Scratching his head hard, Naruto did not get any result and began to turn a new circle under the girl's windows. Noticing a small flower growing next to the porch, he crouched down to take a closer look at it. How beautiful! Thoughtfully looking at an unfamiliar plant, the blonde noticed a couple of pots with other flowers next to him. Turning one of them in his hands, Naruto raised his eyes to the sky. Mesmerized by the stars, he remembered Jiraiya with a sad smile. You'd probably know what to say, Ero Sennin. Grinning at some memory, the guy jerked to sit down more comfortably, and touched the unfortunate pot, so unsuccessfully placed by himself. The treacherous crack, as luck would have it, echoed throughout the street, creating an echo. Naruto stared uncomprehendingly at a pile of fragments mixed with the ground, and they, as it seemed to him, stared at him. After a couple of seconds, realizing what he had done, the blonde jumped up as if stung, and in horror took his head. Frantically looking around, Naruto looked for a place to hide the evidence, and chose a ditch on the other side of the street. Having started raking the earth and pieces of the broken pot into a pile, the blonde did not hear the door open in front of him with a slight creak. A well-known voice exclaimed in surprise, "Naruto? What are you doing here?" Yamanaka asked more quietly. "Ino, I'm here." The blonde man started to chatter, but stopped, barely glancing at the girl. Her eyes were too red. Resolutely straightening up, Naruto replied more confidently, "I came to say goodbye." "What?" Blinking in confusion, the blonde mechanically rubbed her eyes. Why? Here Uzumaki himself was already confused, who did not come up with a further dialogue. Why? The guy echoed, scratching his head. Having only thought of the truth, Naruto began to speak more seriously. "I couldn't leave without saying goodbye." Yamanaka's eyebrows went up on his forehead. Seeing that Ino, it seems, is not going to answer, the blonde continued, "Thank you for everything, Ino." Looking into her eyes, Naruto saw what the girl was trying so hard to hide. Frozen in surprise, he realized Shikamaru's words to the end. They stood looking into each other's eyes and didn't know what to say. Ino was the first to decide. "You," cutting herself off in mid-sentence, the blonde pulled herself together with difficulty, and continued in an even voice, "There's nothing to thank me for." Naruto said nothing, trying to catch her eye, but the girl desperately avoided eye contact. She knew where it would lead. Noticing the trembling shoulders, the blonde threw his jacket over Ino. Swallowing nervously, she felt that she no longer had the strength. Sobbing, Ino clung to Uzumaki. Naruto hugged the girl in response, realizing that it would not get easier for her. "And you know, Naruto, I wasn't cold." The blonde grinned through tears. "I can't not go, Ino," Naruto began when she finally allowed him to look into her eyes again, "but I promised I wouldn't die just like that." I promised Grandma that I would do everything to survive. Keep your promise, Ino asked, snuggling as hard as possible. I can't do it without you. I'm the coolest Hokage, Dadabayo. Grinning, Naruto declared, I always keep my promises. The blonde giggled softly, gradually calming down. Look, if you don't come back, Sasuke will be the next Hokage. What kind of Hokage is he? The seventh was indignant. He is, of course, a good ninja, but not enough. Does he know about the war? Hearing the unexpected question, Naruto frowned. I didn't tell him. Why don't you tell me? I am responsible for the peace between the villages, while there is no peace. You want to help everyone so much, but you don't let anyone help you, Naruto. Reluctantly pulling away from the guy, Yamanaka noticed the first rays of the sun. Looking in the same direction, the blond man narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. Nodding slightly to some thoughts of his own, he spoke, should probably go, Ino. Smiling softly, the blonde took his hand. Thank you for coming. The way Ino looked at him with love made Naruto confused again. His parents and Grandma Tsunade looked at him the same way, but somehow differently. Ruffling his hair, he muttered, You're welcome. Coming down from the porch, he turned around. Everything will be fine, Ino. Everything will be fine, the blonde repeated softly, looking after him. Ino was overwhelmed with emotions. Those few minutes were among the best of her life. She didn't admit it to him, but a short conversation that inspired hope, and Naruto's eyes are so sincere. Shivering, the blonde shuddered. He never took his jacket. Smiling stupidly, Ino watched the silhouette in the distance. Butterflies fluttered in my stomach. The fiery scarlet sunset was taking its last rays. There were two people standing at the Konoha gate, a blonde man dressed in shinobi gear and a woman in a green kimono. Holding out a small pouch, Tsunade spoke, Here's everything you'll need to complete the mission, Naruto. Listen carefully. The blonde man, squinting with displeasure, stretched out. Chan, I know how to use ninja weapons. I said, listen. The woman shouted and continued, You will not use ordinary explosive seals. What does that mean? Tsunade took out a scroll from her pocket with a seal wrapped around it with many symbols. This is an experimental development. There was no final test yet, but I personally checked more than a dozen samples, and everything worked as it should. Having finished, the fifth abruptly tore the seal from the scroll and threw it on the nearest tree. For each seal there is a scroll that activates it. Unlike the usual ones, they do not require shinobi to use the chakra. When activated, the scroll itself will take the right amount of energy from your body. Throwing the scroll into the seal, Tsunade began to take out something else. Impressed by the invention he saw for the first time, Naruto has not said anything yet. Now on, Naruto. To destroy a large building and remain unnoticed for as long as possible, you will need not only to mine it, but also to make an explosion at all points at the same time. This is their second advantage. They are produced in a group. As soon as you install each of the seals, you will have about 30 seconds before they are triggered. Tearing off two new seals, she threw the first, then, after waiting, the second. Half a minute later, a new explosion thundered. Holding a pouch in his hands, the blonde froze, his mouth opened. About the operation itself. I'm sorry, Naruto, but I can't give you more than 14 grand. I've already taken all the leftovers. The laboratory is located in the mountains. This is all the information we can give you. Apart from the approximate location, we have nothing. To destroy it, mine the building around the perimeter, and then immediately leave. If you install 3 seals on each side, you should have 2 more, a small margin, but still. Naruto nodded in agreement, listening to the woman. I almost forgot. Tsunade caught herself and took out another scroll with a seal wrapped around it. This one differed from the previous ones in its yellow color and completely different symbols. Besides, he was a little bigger. Unfortunately, this one is the only one we have left. It turned out to make only 2 samples, and the first one has already been used. It's your father's technique, Naruto. My father? Not paying attention to the questioning look of the shinobi, the 5th began to explain, he'll help you get away. The seal attached to the target instantly transfers it to the scroll. Place it nearby, the range is about 5 kilometers. Then unfold it completely and secure it. After that, you will only need to use the seal on yourself, and it will move you. All the chakra necessary for activation is already sealed in it. Startled, Naruto put the new scroll in his pouch. Sheepishly adjusting the bandage on his forehead, he smiled broadly. You care so much about me, Bachan. Tsunade grinned in response. No one else can handle a fool like you. Gratefully looking at her, Naruto looked back at the sunset. Watching the last ray of sunlight disappear, the blonde man said softly, it's time. Yes. Left alone, the 5th stood for a long time, looking after him. The night was drawing to a close. Naruto, realizing that the forest would soon end, moved with maximum caution. When he hit the barrier, he stopped and looked around. There was no information about him. In addition, the blonde was alerted by something else. Something was wrong with this place, but Naruto couldn't figure out what. Using the hermit mode, Shinobi moved along the border of the barrier, hoping to find something. With Kurama's power, it would be easier. But the presence of such a huge amount of chakra cannot be left unnoticed, and it was impossible to disclose your presence. Having overcome a decent distance, Naruto felt the chakra of several ninjas very close and stopped abruptly. He didn't see anyone, but he felt the chakra perfectly. Hiding in the foliage of the nearest tree, the blonde froze. Strenuously trying to determine their location, he tried his best to hide his own. After waiting for some time, Shinobi did not notice anyone. Paying attention to the trampled grass, Naruto silently jumped off. Without losing his vigilance, Uzumaki set off on the trail. The feeling of the chakra was getting stronger, but it was still straining with something familiar and, so far, incomprehensible. There was a small clearing in the distance, and the solution, apparently, was there. Startled, Naruto listened. Somewhere ahead, the clang of metal was clearly heard, and very close. Taking out the kunai with a silent movement, he prepared for battle. But no one was in a hurry to attack him. Realizing that he was at a disadvantage and that, most likely, he was discovered, the blonde decided to act first. Reaching the clearing with one leap, he froze in horror. Naruto finally realized what was bothering him in the sense chakra. Death. A bloody shinobi was lying right under his feet. Apparently, he had been dead for a long time. His clothes, protector, and part of his face were covered with earth. The unfortunate man's face was covered with dried blood mixed with dust, and had already begun to decompose. Looking around, Naruto also found out the reason for the strange sounds. Hanging from a branch, a kunai dangled on a thread, which, apparently, was one of the precautions of the shinobi who stopped in the clearing. Swinging on the thread like a pendulum, the edge of the blade touched the bandage of the shinobi lying under the tree. What was left of the second corpse was hidden by grass, and the blonde decided to take a closer look at it. 2 glass eyes full of pain and fear looked at the approaching guy. Bending over the face of the deceased, Naruto barely restrained a scream. The blonde man stared at the dead man's protector in disbelief. There was a hidden leaf symbol on the blackened plate. Gritting his teeth in anger, he whispered, "I won't forgive you." Straightening up, Naruto once again looked at the place of death of his comrades, then their corpses. Deciding to linger, the blonde threw his bag on the ground and searched it. Not finding anything suitable, he cursed and looked at the tent. After rummaging through the things of the unfortunate, Naruto grunted with satisfaction. The guy was holding a small shovel in his hands. Choosing a place, he began to dig. You will forever remain the heroes of the hidden leaf, Naruto said, scratching the Konoha symbol on the cobblestone. Feeling for their code tokens in the pouch, the blonde man added, "Thank you." After folding several seals, Naruto bit his thumb and ran it over his palm, which he then applied to the ground. Summoning technique, Naruto-chan, is something serious, since you called me? One of the wise toads stood in the dissipating cloud of smoke. Fukasaku, Sama, pass these 2 tokens to Konoha. The blonde man smiled, holding out his hand. I can't go there now. Be careful, little Naruto. With these words, the elder from Mount Myaboku disappeared. After taking one last look at the clearing, the ninja hurried to the barrier. When he reached it, Naruto slowed down, but, casting aside doubts, crossed it. It's time to end this, Raikage. The landscape, gradually changing to mountains, spoke of the right direction of Uzumaki. Relying on sensory abilities in the hermit mode, Naruto had no difficulty finding a cluster of people. In one of the narrow gorges, he reached his goal. A well-hidden building towered in front of him, which was not on the map in this place. Leaving its premises in the rocks, it was not very high, but, nevertheless, it occupied a lot of space. The walls of this building were disguised as the environment, which was beyond any doubt. The perimeter security consisted, most likely, of Hunins, which is why Naruto decided to act covertly for now. Getting closer to the sentry on the upper landing, the blonde distracted his attention by throwing his father's kunai at his feet. The shinobi who turned around received a well-aimed blow to the throat and fell senseless. Picking up the limp body, Naruto carefully laid it down so that it looked like a relaxed ninja decided to sit down. Silently closing the door behind him, Uzumaki whispered. Penetration is successful, Raikage-sama. 7 minutes ago, an unknown shinobi entered the territory of the L5 facility. Judging by the data recorded by the protective barrier, his strength is not below the level of Kage. What about? Slamming the table, the owner of the office jumped up, swallowing nervously. The assistant continued, the analysis is not yet accurate, but, according to our assumptions, this shinobi may be Naruto Uzumaki. I'm going there immediately. Grant, find me that damn mask. Turn on the gas throughout the territory. Looking out the window with a look full of hatred, the head of the hidden cloud whispered, you will not leave there, Hokage. Instantly examining the room in which he was, Naruto made sure that he was alone. Taking out a yellow scroll from his pouch, he created 2 shadow clones. Handing it to one of them, he turned to the second. We need to distract them. Use the henge. Nodding in response, the clones left the building. Before preparing the scroll with his father's technique, Naruto needed to know where the laboratory was located in order to take into account the radius of its action. Now this problem has been solved. After looking around once more, the blonde chose which direction he would go. Deciding that it was more practical to blow up the lower floors, Uzumaki decided to get there. This part of the building went right into the rocks with its premises, and Naruto chose the places where the walls of the laboratory connect with the rock. Having brought down a part of the rock, he was going to deprive the building of support and sink it to the bottom of the gorge. Carefully removing the ventilation grate, the blonde carefully studied the shaft through which he had to crawl. Uzumaki suggested that ventilation would be indispensable in the development of gas, and, therefore, it would lead him directly to the research hall. Returning the grate to its place, Naruto slowly crawled, listening to the voices in the distance. Inside the ventilation shaft, they could be heard like an echo, making it impossible to determine their location. Level by level, Naruto descended lower and lower, looking for the floor he needed. Finally, through one of the bars, he saw a lot of tables with the same shape of long vessels, to each of which a thin hose was connected, stretched somewhere further than the blonde could see. Assuming that this is the hall where the terrible poison was developed, Naruto took out a kunai and quietly began to cut his way out. When the hole in the shaft was almost completed, the silence was broken by the wail of a siren. An excited voice, which immediately filled the entire building, reported information from the headquarters. There is an outsider shinobi on the territory of the facility. Mr. Raikage's order is to use all the reserves of the destabilizer, cursing the protective barrier. Naruto, spitting on the secrecy that had become meaningless, quickly cut himself a way out. Putting the kunai back into the pouch, the blonde felt a powerful current of wind that enveloped him with cold. With a short blow of his hand, knocking out a piece of cut metal, Naruto fell out of the mine, coughing violently. Staring in amazement at the ventilation passage from which he had just got out, the guy listened to the voice of the guard, which was heard from everywhere. Use all the reserves of the destabilizer. Realizing that his original plan had been destroyed, the blonde turned around at the sound of the slamming door. A moment later, he found himself surrounded by 5 shinobi, each of whom was wearing a strange mask similar to a gas mask. Realizing that he had very little time left before the start of the gas action, the blonde man prepared for battle. A blue sphere swirled in Uzumaki's hand. The element of water, the great waterfall. A huge column of water formed in the middle of the hall, which immediately collapsed on the place where the blonde was. At the last moment, avoiding a terrible blow, Naruto disappeared, appearing behind one of the enemies. Rasengan, with a strangled wheeze, the shinobi was slammed into the wall, and the blonde, dodging a blow in the back, took out an unusual-looking kunai with 2 teeth on the sides of the main blade. Having repelled the shurikens thrown at him, he rushed at the opponents. Cloud ninjas couldn't use their destructive ninjutsu, because they had to protect the lab, not destroy it. The shinobi, who were spinning in a deadly dance, slowly pushed Naruto to the wall, away from the tables with vessels. Jumping back, avoiding another fatal blow, Uzumaki landed, wincing, and a fresh scratch on his cheek glistened with blood. The ninja, who was closest to the blonde, passed through his wakizashi chakra and rushed to Uzumaki. Ducking under the enemy's arm, Naruto wanted to strike at him with a blue sphere, but before reaching the body, Rasengan evaporated, emitting a light whistle. Instantly, the shinobi who took advantage of this struck a cutting blow, throwing the blonde away. At the last moment, Naruto, who managed to cross his arms in front of him, crashed into one of the tables, breaking it. Rising to his feet, he looked at his palms, no longer feeling the chakras in them. Realizing that the gas had already poisoned his body enough, depriving him of the opportunity to use techniques, Naruto tightened his grip on his father's kunai and rushed forward. At the same moment, the crash of the falling wall was heard. Uzumaki, who did not have time to notice anything, was blown away by an unexpected blow from the side. Slamming into the wall, Naruto wiped a thin trickle of blood from his split lip with his sleeve. Through the settling dust, the silhouettes of 5 shinobi in special masks were visible, and one of them clearly stood out for his height. It was as if something broke inside the blonde man. The 4th Raikage was standing in front of him. "Are you going far?" The girl in the shinobi outfit shuddered and turned around. "You know that, Shikamaru. That's why I'm here." Shaking her head negatively, Yamanaka replied, "You won't stop me." "I'm not going to. I just don't want you to risk yourself for nothing." "You can hardly help him, Ino," flashing her eyes, the blonde hissed. "But I will try." Unlike you or Sakura, turning her back to her old friend, she made it clear that the conversation was over. "It is possible that this time Sakura helped him more than any of us," the brunette said thoughtfully, looking after the girl, soberly assessing his chances of winning. Naruto understood that he could not fight them. Holding the kunai in front of him, ready to repel an enemy attack, the blonde pondered his next actions. Grinning impudently, Raikage was in no hurry to attack. "You're not leaving here, Uzumaki." Naruto didn't answer. Silently studying the opponent's face, he reached into his pouch, taking out one of the scrolls received from Tsunade. Contemptuously measuring the prepared guy with a glance, Hei said, "You will lose just like your father." Naruto's face was distorted with rage, but he said nothing, rushing at the dark-skinned shinobi. Throwing shurikens in front of him, the blonde jumped, intending to land behind the enemies. Being in the air, Naruto saw how the silhouette of the wreckage disappeared, and the shurikens whizzed into the place where he had just stood. The next moment Uzumaki received a powerful blow in the back, pinning him to the floor cracked from the collision. Expectorating blood, the guy tried to roll over, but Hei did it for him, kicking him in the side. Flying head over heels a few meters away, the blonde man grimaced, coughing. Staggering, he slowly got to his feet, exposing his father's kunai in front of him. Tearing off the seal from the activating scroll with his other hand, Uzumaki rushed forward again, which only angered the wreckage even more. Realizing that he would not be able to react, Naruto, without waiting for a response from his opponent, threw a seal in front of him, throwing a scroll after her. The calculation turned out to be correct, and the fist of the dark-skinned shinobi, before catching up with the blonde, connected the torn seal with the scroll. At the same moment, flames broke out and a deafening explosion was heard, scattering the fighting shinobi in different directions. Half of the hall was engulfed in fire, the other collapsed on the floor below. Acrid smoke filled the room, making it impossible to see. Falling down, Naruto wheezed in pain. The impact of the fall stunned him, but there was no delay. Stumbling, the guy ran as fast as he could, trying to get out of sight. On the run, he snatched out 2 more seals, which he immediately fixed on the walls of the hall in which he found himself. Panting, Naruto ran among dozens of identical doors, using every second of his time to get as far away as possible. The head of Kumogakure was one of the fastest in the world, but he used chakra to achieve his speed. His enormous strength and chakra reserves, comparable to the level of Biju, gave him the title of the strongest cloud shinobi, but the destruction that followed the use of such power was now impossible. The fourth needed to protect his precious laboratory and the samples stored in it at all costs, and therefore he could not move with all his speed. This is exactly what Naruto wanted to turn to his advantage. Having lost count of the many confusing turns and various halls, the blonde ran into another room that he met along the way, and, slamming the door, plopped down on the floor, gasping for air. Listening, Naruto made sure that his pursuers did not find him. Feeling a throbbing pain in his right leg, the blonde man carefully examined the wound. A piece of wood the size of a shuriken was sticking out of his thigh, apparently from a table that had shattered into splinters. Blood flowing out in weak jerks reported that an artery had been touched. Wincing painfully, Naruto began to apply a bandage without touching the shard sticking out of it, so as not to open the wound even more. Voices were heard outside, and several people ran by, judging by the sounds, very close. Holding his breath, the blonde waited a little longer. Calming down, he tightened the bandage tighter and stood up. Thinking about further actions, Naruto drew attention to the ventilation grate right under the ceiling. Almost exclaiming with joy, he carefully took it off. A sudden gust of wind almost blew him away, miraculously holding on to the edges of the hole. Pulling himself up with difficulty, Naruto looked out. The ventilation passage was not connected to the general system and led to the street. Below him stretched the bottom of a rocky gorge that went down for thousands of meters. The room, as it turned out, was in a place where the building became part of the rock. The wind raging inside the utility room created considerable noise, turning everything upside down, so it was necessary to act quickly. Jumping down, the blonde man took out 2 seals and fixed them on the wall that connected the structure with the rock. They tried to open the door. Cursing, Naruto jumped up to the ventilation, pulling out kunai on the go. There were thuds, and the door cracked treacherously. Without having time to think, the blonde jumped out, plunging the blade into the wall. Holding on to the kunai with one hand, Naruto tried to get the thread with the other. he was not allowed to do this. Following the crack of the breaking wood, a new blow was heard. Dust and small stones rained down on top of the blonde. Staggering, part of the wall that Naruto was holding collapsed. Uzumaki tried to grab the edge of the hole, but he immediately had to let go. Another piece of the wall flew into the abyss. Sliding off, Naruto tried in vain to catch on to something, continuing to fall into the abyss. Kunai did not help. With bright sheaves of sparks, he cut the stone, not allowing it to stop. The blonde man was approaching the ledge of the cliff that was visible in the distance with rapid speed. When only a few meters remained before him, Naruto realized that he would break. Abandoning his senseless attempts to hold on, he grouped himself and crossed his arms in front of him, intending to soften the blow. A shadow flickered nearby. The next moment, a hand grabbed him by the neck and forcefully threw him out of the window. Shards of broken glass rang. Slammed into the wall, the blonde man fell. Spitting blood, he tried to get up, but received a blow, and then another. The unknown grabbed him by the collar and lifted him up, preparing to strike another blow. With a strangled wheeze, Naruto clung to the enemy, knocking him to the floor. In front of him lay a hidden Cloud Hunin, one of the arrivals from the wreckage. Fighting fiercely, the shinobi dealt each other one blow after another. Once on top, Naruto raised the kunai over the enemy, intending to finish him off. Smiling strangely, Shinobi laughed hysterically. Reikage-sama, mission accomplished. Gritting his teeth in anger, Naruto stared at the transmitter attached to the man's neck. In a rage, plunging the kunai into the floor, very close to the opponent's face, the blonde hissed, "Damn you!" Taking off, Naruto jumped out of the room and collided with another ninja. Dodging his blows, Uzumaki took out explosive seals. Another shinobi appeared in the aisle, immediately attacking Naruto. Fighting off enemy shurikens, the blonde jumped up to the wall to mine it as well. The moment he got to her, cracks began to creep along her, and the next moment the guy was thrown back by a powerful blow. Stunned Naruto did not have time to get up, as he was overtaken by a new blow. The thrown shurikens flashed again. Twitching to the side, the blonde man tried to deviate. Blood sprayed. Falling to the floor, Naruto felt himself being grabbed by the collar. Someone very heavy sat on top of him. "It's not over yet, Uzumaki." The fourth wreckage roared, delivering another blow. Naruto struggled, trying in vain to get out. Blood from the eye touched by the shuriken flooded the face, making it difficult to see. Blow after blow, the dark-skinned shinobi drove the blonde's head into the floor. Losing consciousness, Naruto stopped resisting. Frozen in surprise, Hei stared at the limp body in his arms. "Don't you dare die, puppy. You will die by my hand." Throwing out all his hatred, Reikage shouted. In a rage, grabbing the guy by the shoulders, he roughly shook him, hoping to bring him back to consciousness. "Don't you dare die yourself," but Naruto didn't react. A gaping hole in the ceiling. Swirling clouds of dust. The acrid smell of burning. Staring blankly at one point, Naruto slowly came to himself, not understanding much yet. Coughing, he tilted his head to the side to spit out the blood. My lungs were on fire, and every breath caused pain that had already become noticeable. Gathering his thoughts, Uzumaki tried to stand up. The sudden movement made my head spin, and my arms buckled by themselves. Naruto flopped onto his back and exhaled in a strangled sigh. Deciding to delay getting to his feet, he raised himself slightly on his elbows to look around. Unable to restrain a surprised exclamation, Naruto stared at the fragments of broken glass surrounding him, broken tables and scorched pieces of the collapsed ceiling. What the hell happened here? Shaking his head around, the blonde man noticed that his left eye could not see anything. Tensing his whole body, he still sat down. "Naruto, puzzled, covered his eye with his palm and listened to the sensations. Dark scarlet blood flowed down his arm. When the first drops of it reached the floor, the blonde sighed, "There's nothing I can do about it." Opening the pouch, he looked for bandages in it. After twirling them in his hands, Naruto took off the bandage with the protector before starting to wind it. Having applied a kind of compress to the eye, Uzumaki returned Konoha's protector to its place. Kneeling down, he once again looked around the hall. Naruto's pupils widened. Someone's hand was visible among the pile of debris. Judging by the equipment, it was one of the shinobi who arrived from the wreckage. Reinforcements or a third party? Turning to the ruined ceiling, Naruto assessed the situation. He understood that this might be his last chance to get out of here alive. Even now, on his knees, Naruto was leaning on his hand so as not to lose his balance. It was hard to breathe. Lowering his eyes to the drops of his own blood on the floor, he mentally turned to Tsunade. "Forgive me, Bachan. Looks like I might not keep my promise. But this gas can turn into a huge disaster in the future. I can't back down now." A stubborn light lit up in the blonde man's eyes. Naruto took out a pair of explosive seals and threw them into the corners. He staggered heavily to his feet. Armed with a kunai, Naruto gathered his strength and headed for the doorway. Once in the long hall, the blonde hesitated, not knowing where to go next. Faint echoes sounded from all sides. There were shouts and noises in it, reminiscent of the sounds of a battle. Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto moved to the left. The corridor swerved, going one way, then the other. The blonde man had been running along it for a long time, but the confusing hall did not lead him anywhere. Deciding that he had already covered enough distance, Naruto hurriedly took out another seal and fixed it on the wall. Time was running out. Voices could already be heard in the distance, and Naruto didn't want to know who they belonged to. Trying to determine where the sound of several pairs of feet is coming from, Uzumaki froze, listening to every rustle. "Hurry up, to help Mr. Wreckage." Someone's voice suddenly sounded very close. A moment later, Naruto saw 3 shinobi clouds opposite. Cursing, he did not let them come to their senses, throwing a smoke bomb. The blonde man ran as fast as he could, and after him he heard a scream, "He's alive!" Follow him, the low wail of a siren filling the entire building. The noise of the chase. The pounding of the heart, drowning out everything else. Panting, Naruto raced through the endless corridors of the mining laboratory, trying to buy himself as much time as possible. It couldn't go on like this for a long time, and the blonde understood that. Putting the kunai in front of him, he jumped, turning around. Sliding some more distance on the soles of his feet, Naruto looked at his opponents with an appraising glance. Experienced Hunins, twice his age. "Give up, Hokage," the one standing closest began, taking out the wakizashi. Naruto grinned in response. "Can you take off your mask?" Without saying another word, the shinobi attacked each other. Parrying a stabbing sword thrust, the blonde jumped up, throwing shurikens at those standing behind. One of the ninjas slightly deviated from them, the other rushed straight to Naruto, defending himself with a kunai. Landing, the blonde bounced away, avoiding a cutting blow to the throat. Shinobi with wakizashi was already nearby, taking advantage of the fact that Naruto does not see on the left. Without having time to defend himself, the blonde flew several meters away, tumbling. The ninja, who decided to build on the success, jumped up to Uzumaki, intending to pierce him with a sword. Deftly taking advantage of his position, Naruto kicked wakizashi out of his hands and, then, returned the debt with a powerful blow from a U-turn. Without letting the opponent recover, the blonde threw one of the remaining seals at his feet, immediately activating it. An explosion thundered, throwing the shinobi in different directions. Clouds of black smoke rose into the air, instantly blocking the view. Naruto winced. It was painful to breathe without it. Throwing one of the kunai in front of him, he silently jumped aside, hoping to confuse the enemy. You will pay for this, Hokage. He was my friend. Following a cry full of rage, a new one rang out, element of fire, great fiery destruction. A terrifying stream of flame burst out of the thick smoke, burning everything in its path. It's bad, flashed through the blonde's head before the fire consumed him as well. Tell Mr. Hokage that we have caught him. I think he and Darui-san are also finished. The ninja walking towards Uzumaki briefly threw to his partner. 4. Finished? Naruto croaked faintly, having collapsed on the floor. He convulsively clutched his father's kunai, not going to give up. The burnt sleeves of the hands instinctively exposed in front of the enemy equipment seemed to be welded to the skin. She, badly burned, bled and stung, causing terrible torment with any movement. Reveling in his victory, Hunin grinned and kicked the blonde. Once on his stomach, Naruto hissed in pain. The flames raging behind the two shinobi cast long shadows. Vaguely seeing the outline of the ninja standing behind him, the blonde saw him raise his hand with a kunai for the last blow. Tensing his whole body, Naruto tried to stand up with the last of his strength. His fingers scrabbled frantically on the stone, hoping to grab onto something. Tearing his hands into blood, Uzumaki did not leave futile efforts to get to his feet. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of a shadow. A second later, he heard his enemy collapse to the floor. A mocking voice behind me asked, "Can you stand up, Sasuke?" Not believing his ears, Naruto turned around. Uchiha stood in front of him, holding out his hand. Staring at his old friend uncomprehendingly, the blonde man grabbed her. Sasuke in response helped him to stand up, holding the staggering Uzumaki. "Let's go," Sasuke replied, ignoring Naruto's surprise. The blonde man stared at the Uchiha in amazement. The brunette looked shabby. "Sasuke. You, yes. But how? Sakura sent me a hawk." Remembering the night meeting with Sakura and her guilty look, Naruto smiled. "That's how. We need to leave." The blonde man frowned and shook his head. "I can't. We still need to install it." With these words, he reached into his pouch to check the scrolls from Tsunade. Suddenly Naruto stopped and froze. Uchiha looked at him questioningly. The blonde man continued, puzzled. "For more explosive seals." Sasuke said nothing, squinting suspiciously. Pointing his finger in the direction, Naruto threw his arm over the shoulder of the brunette to go. Supporting Uzumaki, Sasuke slowly moved forward. The narrow corridor had already begun to seem endless to the blonde when Uchiha broke the silence. "This way," nodding towards one of the doorways, he explained, "I was here." The hall filled with bright light smelled of blood. Scattered furniture. Broken medical equipment. Puddles of unknown solutions. Dark splashes on the cracked walls. Naruto took out 2 scrolls and handed one of them to Sasuke. "Tear off the seal and continue as with the usual explosive." Having secured his own, the blonde exhaled and sat down wearily, leaning on the wall. Wincing, he snorted in pain. His right arm seemed to be broken. After making sure that Uchiha was still at the other end of the hall, Naruto took out the remaining scrolls from his pouch, wondering where another one was. Frowning, remembering that they would explode only when everything was installed, Uzumaki looked up at Sasuke. The blonde was looking at his friend absent-mindedly when it dawned on him, "Hokage." Their fight flashed before my eyes, the heavy fists of the old shinobi, dull pain, darkness. "We need to go back." Uchiha, who came closer, asked, "How do you activate them, Naruto?" "They will explode 30 seconds after each installation." "There's not enough time to leave," the brunette said thoughtfully. "I have this." Naruto took out a yellow seal from his pocket. "My father's technique is in it." Looking at her skeptically, Sasuke objected, but it can only be used for one. Naruto smiled dazzlingly in response. I have solved this problem, Sasuke. With a demanding hand outstretched, the blonde man stood up and tore off another explosive seal. Throwing it on the far wall, he immediately activated it. A deafening explosion rang out, momentarily blinding the two shinobi. Bright sheaves of sparks flew up to the ceiling. The stone fell into the abyss with a crash. A strong whirlwind burst into the building. After waiting a little while for the dust to settle down, Sasuke walked over to the hole that had formed, looking into it. Feeling a push in the back, the brunette realized that he was losing his footing. Turning around in the air, he shouted in amazement, trying to overpower the noise of the wind, Naruto? But why? The last thing Sasuke saw before the aptly thrown yellow seal moved him was Naruto's smile. Uchiha could not hear his answer, but Sharingan read his lips, because you are my friend. Sorry, Sasuke. After catching his breath a little, the blonde wandered back into the corridor. It was hard to walk holding onto the walls. Naruto slowly moved forward. After the fresh air, it only became harder to breathe, and now it seemed to the blonde that he was spitting out his lungs along with the blood. At one of the forks, Naruto noticed that there were more cracks on the walls in one of the directions. Uzumaki didn't know how long Uchiha had been here and what he had managed to do, but he felt that he was on the right path. With each step, the cracks were getting deeper, and the blood splashes were getting darker and bigger. The very air seemed to be saturated with death. Having secured the last seal, the blonde moved on. The hall was not as long as the previous one. Stopping in the broken doorway, Naruto froze in amazement, looking around. It was a small hall, but with a very high ceiling. Once there were two large tables, of which now there are only splinters. Several people were lying next to their fragments. Scientists. Looking at them in amazement, the blonde man noted, they are alive. Not so far from them lay the guard. Sasuke treated them more cruelly. Wincing at the dark scarlet puddle, Naruto happily opened his mouth. The last of the explosive scrolls lay among the burnt wood. He stumbled towards it. His knees buckled of their own accord, and the blonde flopped down, closing his eyes for a second from the pain in his broken arm. The voice that rang out the next moment made him forget about her. You're still here, Uzumaki, the fourth Hokage whispered softly, smiling weakly. Shocked, Naruto looked up. The head of Kumogakure was literally driven into the wall near the ceiling and was in a semi-sitting position. A continuous trickle of blood dripped from his mouth, staining the stone in a burgundy color. With each exhalation, a low bubbling sound, accompanied by a wheeze, escaped from the throat of the old shinobi. A head that had fallen helplessly on his shoulders. Reddened eyes, looking at Naruto from under their brows with cold hatred. Hokage continued to whisper, not taking his mad gaze away from the blonde. Apparently, your boyfriend left you to die. Naruto's face contorted with rage. Shut up. You don't know anything about Sasuke. Trying to get up, the blonde man fell on his stomach, coughing up blood. Unable to find the strength to get to his feet, he crawled towards the scroll. What are you doing? Croaked the fourth, carefully watching Uzumaki. His gaze fell on the scroll that he had given to his subordinates to study. Hokage, not believing his eyes, hissed, You haven't given up yet? Even at death's door, are you trying to stop me? Smearing his own blood on the floor, Naruto crawled. Stubbornly clinging with his good hand, the blonde man slowly approached his goal. The pounding of his heart drowned out all other sounds. My vision blurred. The only thing Uzumaki saw right now was the last scroll. He was already very close. The blonde man stretched out his hand, feebly grabbing the edge of it with his fingers. Pulling a little harder, Naruto managed to tear off the seal. Don't you dare! Raikage roared, spitting blood, I won't let you. Blood sprayed into the blonde man's face. Naruto screamed wildly. The kunai thrown by the fourth pierced through his palm, pinning it to the floor. Uzumaki gritted his teeth in frustration. The last seal lay a few centimeters from his hand, practically fixed. Raikage's lips twitched in a venomous smile. "Do you already nak?" The old shinobi faltered, looking into the blonde man's eyes. The fierce force of the look silenced him. "I never. I won't give up," Naruto squeezed out with a hoarse voice, "this is mine." Way. Ninja, the pain clouded my mind, confusing my thoughts. Uzumaki couldn't use a technique, couldn't stand up, couldn't help himself with his other hand. Naruto has only an indomitable will to protect his native village. And it was she who was controlling him now. A crazy thought flashed through my head. Staring at the kunai sticking out of his palm, the guy barely nodded to himself. Pushing himself a little closer with his feet, Naruto tensed his whole body and pressed on his hand. A sharp pain shackled the blonde, but he did not think to stop. Giving all his strength, Naruto pulled his hand towards the seal, forcing kunai to cut his palm. Millimeter by millimeter, the blood-soaked fingers moved forward, pressing the paper. Touching the floor, the blonde realized that the seal was fixed. With a sigh of relief, Naruto smiled faintly. A thought flashed through the fading consciousness, I did it. I'm sorry, Naruto, but I couldn't save your eye. Waking up, Naruto slowly turned to the sound, looking somewhere through Sasuke. Without reacting to the words of an old friend, the blonde man glanced around, trying to focus on something. Uchiha sighed heavily, watching the blonde lying down. Naruto looked, to put it mildly, terrible. Sasuke didn't like all those bloodstains on his scarred and burnt equipment in places. Naruto will definitely stay in the hospital for a long time, a temporarily bandaged broken arm, confused hoarse breathing, a lacerated wound in place of the left eye. But that wasn't what scared Uchiha. Uzumaki's blank stare made Sasuke think that it wasn't Naruto he pulled out of the bottom of the gorge. Finally, the blonde interrupted Uchiha's thoughts and exhaled weakly, "You pulled me out." "But how? It doesn't matter. What do you mean it doesn't matter?" Uzumaki squinted uncomprehendingly. "I was in the very epicenter of the explosion of one of the seals. The building was collapsing right on top of me. I couldn't survive. I couldn't." Uchiha's quiet answer fell on Naruto like thunder. Stunned by his most terrifying guess, he whispered, "At what cost?" Sasuke, who had been sitting sideways to the blonde before, finally turned around. "My Sharingan." The blonde man's remaining eye opened wide. "What?" "Izanagi. The forbidden technique of the Uchiha clan. It allows you to change reality and turn it into an illusion, but using this technique is deprived of light. His eye will never open again. No." Naruto's voice was full of bitterness. Gritting his teeth, he squeezed his eyes shut. Then, shaking his head negatively, he looked into Sasuke's Rinnegan. Unable to stand it, Uchiha turned away. It always seemed to him that those blue eyes were looking straight into the soul. And this time there was too much pain in Naruto's gaze. Uzumaki followed the example of his best friend. The first stars were appearing in the sky. Several hours have passed since Naruto woke up, but after the first conversation, the shinobi did not say a word. Uzumaki stubbornly did not want to recognize the victim of the named brother, and Sasuke was not going to waste energy on discussing his act. Being completely calm outwardly, Sasuke was furious at what had happened. Calmly waiting for Naruto to fully recover, he asked, "How much longer?" The blonde man replied thoughtfully, "You're poisoned too, aren't you?" Yamanaka helped with the recovery as much as possible. What? Uchiha nodded somewhere to the side. Naruto, grunting and snuffling, turned over on his side to see what Sasuke was pointing at. Speechless, he stared at Kunoichi in amazement. Her appearance dug into the heart of a better enemy kunai. Sitting with her back to the guys, the girl pulled her knees to her chest, hugging them. Ino's shoulders heaved convulsively with quiet sobs. Beautiful hair stuck together from blood, soot and dust, acquiring a brownish hue. The brunette did not let Uzumaki come to his senses. "It's your blood, Naruto," Uchiha explained mercilessly. "Can you imagine how she felt when she found you among the wreckage?" "Don't." But Sasuke was relentless. "You once told me that my brother taught you not to try to cope with everything alone. How could you hide the war from me? How could you not give a damn about Konoha, coming here with such a stupid idea?" "Shut up," Naruto growled softly. The brunette didn't even pay attention to it. "How could you break the promise you made to the fifth Hokage?" "It was my duty as," Sasuke rudely interrupted him, badly hiding the notes of rage. "The village needs a living leader. You had no right to thoughtlessly give up your life, condemning the shinobi world to even greater chaos. You didn't even think what it would be like for your loved ones." Naruto, powerlessly bowing his head, whispered in a hollow voice, "Stop it." Softened, Sasuke continued, "Look at her, Naruto. She's here for a reason. She rushed to your aid because, obviously, she cares about you. Don't you dare hurt her anymore." A short nod from Naruto after a while quite satisfied Sasuke. The brunette understood that his words caused unbearable pain. But he could not accept that his friend had shouldered the heavy burden of the hatred of their world. Once it was Naruto who prevented Uchiha from doing the same. Apparently, it's time to repay the debt. After giving his friend a couple of minutes, Sasuke repeated, "Don't hurt her." Naruto's muffled, "I promise," satisfied Uchiha. Deciding that the conversation was over, he turned to Yamanaka. "He's awake." Startled, Ino abruptly turned around, hastily wiping her tears. Stumbling, the girl rushed to the blonde. Looking anxiously into his face, she happily sniffed and whispered, "How are you?" Naruto tried to grin. "Grandma Tsunade will kill me." Muttering something indistinctly in response, the blonde snuggled up to him, sobbing with happiness. Nodding approvingly, Sasuke turned away, hiding a smile. "Sasuke, can you tell me later what Bachan wanted to tell me?" Scratching the back of his head, Naruto smiled guiltily. When he reached his own office, he tried his luck again. "Let's go," Sasuke snapped, firmly shoving the blonde in. The young Hokage could be understood. Sakura and Tsunade, demonstrating amazing unanimity, gave Naruto a complete dressing down as soon as they were convinced that his life was out of danger. It had been about 2 weeks, and Uzumaki was confidently on the mend, slowly getting out of the hospital room into the street, but one could only dream of the favor of the hot-tempered Kunoichi so far. Therefore, Naruto still tried not to catch their eye. "You're late," Five said sternly. The blonde man opened his mouth to start making excuses, but Sasuke didn't let him do it. "We met a crowd of children on the way with a bunch of questions." Completely ignoring the grateful look of his friend, the brunette took his place. Naruto hastened to follow his example. Shikamaru, grinning, followed him with his gaze. He knew that Uchiha had to drag the resisting blonde by force. From the window seat, Nara had a gorgeous view of the main street. Shifting in his chair and coughing, Naruto sat down. Tsunade sniffed threateningly. Furtively making a face at her, the blonde man met Ino's gaze. The girl giggled softly into her fist and smiled warmly. The seventh felt better. The fifth did not pull. A message came from Suna this morning. Gaara wants to call a meeting of the 5 Kage. In addition, he reports that the hidden cloud has called Killer Bee to the post of the next Raikage. Will he become a Raikage? Naruto jumped up. Baisan left his village immediately after the declaration of war. I think if he agrees, we will have a chance to end the war, Shikamaru said. Tsunade, nodding in agreement, asked, "What are you thinking of doing, Naruto? I have to see him." The blonde man exclaimed and turned to Ino, what are the other villages there? We conducted the last interrogation a week ago. It seems that Mizukage has stopped sending her shinobi closer to our territory. There is no information at all about other villages. Then it's decided. Naruto slapped the table. Tomorrow I'm going to a meeting of 5 Kage. He hasn't even been called yet. Sasuke besieged him. If that's all, then we have nothing more to talk about. And yet he pisses me off. The blonde man stretched out with displeasure after the Uchiha left the office. Shikamaru and Tsunade also did not linger. While Uzumaki was in the hospital, the fifth managed the village, and all other issues were settled before the arrival of the blonde. Putting his hands behind his head, Naruto was about to grumble a little more, but his thoughts were interrupted by Ino. The girl, coming closer, smiled. He doesn't seem to have changed a bit. He will never change. But still, life wouldn't be the same without him, Naruto admitted. Ino giggled. That sounds nice. The guy looked at her indignantly. The girl became serious. Will he leave the village again? He said that he would stay until the end of the war. Naruto began to mimic Uchiha. He'll make sure I don't do anything stupid again. I've already collected a bunch of missions. That's how. Ino nodded understandingly. I think I'll go too, Naruto. I'm glad you're okay. Smiling at the last words, Yamanaka headed out of the office. Uzumaki swallowed nervously. It's now or never. Ino. Wait, what? Thank you. For what? Confused by the question, the blonde hesitated. It's already dark outside. Ino's eyebrows went up. Scratching the back of his head, Naruto blushed, but continued, I'll walk you out. That's the end of it.